Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Kiana and I do a lot of sewing and fashion videos, and today we have a sewing tutorial and pattern for this tent dress. Now, if you would like to purchase the sewing pattern, that is the first link down below, but I'm also going to link a short form video on the top of the screen and down below showing you how I patterned it myself if you're interested in that. And as you guys know, I love to reward my subscribers who have their notification bells turned on, so you can use the code TENTDRESS until tomorrow at midnight Eastern time to get 30% off. All the required materials for this project will be in that first link down below in the pattern listing description, and all of the tools and equipment I use throughout this video is going to be down below in the video description. I've rated this pattern as beginner friendly, so if you are a beginner, feel free to try this one out. I would say the most challenging part of this pattern is the hidden bias tape binding around the armholes and neckline, and then the wider hem. But if you're not up to the challenge of the wider hem, you can also modify that to make it a little bit more beginner friendly, and I talk about that a little later in the video. Still a very beginner friendly project. Anyways, without further ado, let's just get into the tutorial. So starting off, print out your pattern at 100% scale, and you can use the scale on page 1 to make sure printing has been done correctly. Next, just line up your pieces of paper edge to edge without trimming down your paper or overlapping, using the lettered and numbered diamonds to help you line everything up, and then just tape it together. Make sure you refer to your instruction pamphlet to figure out what size to cut out and cut on the corresponding line. For reference, I'm cutting out a US size 0. Now we're going to prepare the side seams, center front seam, and shoulder seams for sewing. So we're going to serge all of those edges independently. So again, the side seams, serge those edges independently of each other on both the front and the back pieces. Also serge the shoulder seams. And then on those front dress pieces, make sure you're also serging down the center front seams. This is just going to prepare everything to be pressed open later after we sew those seams together. Now place the front dress pieces right sides together at the center front seam. Pin the dress together from the hem all the way to that notch for the ties. Once you have that pinned, you're gonna sew from the hem to that notch. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and end of your stitch as always, and do not sew above that notch. Next, bring this over to your iron and press the entire seam open all the way from the hem all the way up to the neckline. So even where that seam is not sewn at the top above the notch, still press that seam allowance open 1/2 inch. Now to finish the area above the notch, fold that seam allowance above the notch under a 1/4 inch and press. Now this is a nice clean edge ready for you to top stitch around the perimeter of. Now you're going to top stitch really close to the edge of that seam allowance, down one side, pivot across to the other side, and then back up towards the neckline. Now take the front and back dress and place it right sides together and pin along the side seams and the shoulder seams. Once you've got them pinned, you can go ahead and sew those seams and then press them open. Now we're going to finish the arm side of this dress using a hidden bias tape binding. So to do this, get your 1/4 inch double fold bias tape, open it up, and fold under the edge of that bias tape by 1/2 inch. Press it, then refold your bias tape back up into quarters and press it as well. This is just so the edge of your bias tape is finished. Then place your bias tape right side down at the arm side, lining up that folded edge you just created with the side seam of the garment. Then you're going to stitch in the first crease of the bias tape, making sure to line up the edge of the bias tape with the edge of the arm side. Once you sew all the way around the arm side with the bias tape, you want to make sure that the end of the bias tape overlaps with the beginning of the bias tape by 1/2 inch at least. You can do 3/4 inch to be super safe. Then stop sewing and trim the excess bias tape. Now bring this back over to your iron, refold the bias tape into its original shape, hiding the seam allowance on the inside, and press. Now this is where you'd stop pressing if you were sewing a normal bias tape binding, but because we're doing a hidden binding, we are going to turn this under one more time so the bias tape ends up on the inside of the garment, and then we're going to press this in place. Now bring it over to the sewing machine and sew along the edge of the bias tape to secure that in place. And that is how you do a hidden bias tape binding. Now for the neckline, you're going to do basically all of the exact same steps, except for at the very beginning, you don't need to press that edge under 1/2 inch. You're actually just going to leave about 1 inch of an overhang where you start and stop sewing the bias tape and fold it towards the back side of the garment. So you wrap it around that center front edge and then you can sew in that first crease of the bias tape like we normally do. And what this will do is catch that bias tape on the back side. So when you pull it out and refold it to be back to how it was originally, it finishes that center edge really clean. Then just follow all the same steps you did for the arm's eye. So press it as you would normal bias tape, and then fold it under one more time to hide the bias tape, press it, and then stitch that into place close to the edge. Now moving on to the bow ties at the front of the dress. So you're gonna cut out 6 ties and then take the 2 short edges and press them under a 1/4 inch. Then fold your bow tie in half long ways and press. This is just to get a crease down the center. Then you're gonna take the 2 long edges and fold them towards that center crease and press. Basically, you're dividing your bow ties into quarters and creating your own little bias tape. And then lastly, you're gonna fold it in half on that original crease and press it. And then you're ready to top stitch down the long open edge of this bow tie to secure it. Now we can sew on the ties to the dress. So we're gonna do 3 on one side, 3 on the other. You're gonna place them behind that center front fold about 1/2 inch under. You're gonna place one at the very top of the neckline, one at the bottom of the opening, and one directly in the middle. Now there are a couple of ways you can sew this on. You can just sew one straight stitch right over that top stitch that's already there. Or what I'm gonna do is sew a little box right over top where the center front of the dress overlaps our bow ties. So I'm just going to sew a square box through both layers to really secure it in place. Now we're gonna move on to the hem, and before we start pressing and hemming, I would recommend that you guys leave this dress out hanging overnight so that the side seams where it's bias cut can stretch, and then in the morning you'll be able to mark an even hem equidistant from the floor all the way around the dress. So we're just gonna trim the side here to make it a little bit more even. Once you've done that, you can go into the hemming. And for this, we're going to do a wide 2-inch hem to give the dress more volume and body. Normally for a hem that's so curved, I would say to do a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch hem turned twice and then stitched down. So if you're more of a beginner, I would recommend doing that. Pressing 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch, turning it again, pressing, and then stitching it down. But if you want more volume like we have, this is what you're going to do. First, press the hem under 1/2 inch all the way around the dress, then bring it over to your sewing machine and sew 2 rows of basting stitches about 1/4 inch away from the edge and about 1/8 inch away from the edge. And to sew a basting stitch, make sure you do not backstitch at the beginning or end of your stitch. Leave the thread tails really long at both the beginning and the end, and also lengthen your stitch to the max length. Once you do that, bring it back over to the iron, fold the hem under another 2 inches, and before you start pressing, you want to grab the gathering stitches that you've created and start gently pulling on those so that it can gather the wide edge of the hem into the smaller edge where you're pressing it to. So you kind of have to go back and forth playing around with pulling on the gathers and then pressing. Basically what you're trying to do is fit a wider measurement into a smaller measurement. So once you've pressed all the way around the edge, you can bring it back over to your sewing machine and just top stitch the hem down to finish your dress. All right, and that is how you sew this tent dress. Let me know which one was your favorite, this split color polka dot dress or this denim floral dress. Personally, I really like the split color, but I feel like most people are gonna like the denim. And don't forget that the pattern is the first link down below, and you can use the code TENTDRESS to get 30% off this pattern until tomorrow at midnight Eastern time. Also, if you liked this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up because it's the easiest way to support your favorite creators for free. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is Kiana Bonollo. But yeah, subscribe and don't forget to turn on that notification bell so you don't miss out on pattern discounts in the future. And yeah, I think that's everything. So I'll see you next time. Bye.